New York? Are you in
Yeah,
Manhattan?
I'm in New York. I'm actually in our museum in Soho. Next time you're down here, I want to give you the tour, man. Definitely, if you find yourself in Soho at any point soon, let me know.
I definitely will. I was planning on taking my daughter in 2020, but that plan got thwarted.
Yeah, yeah, as many did, yes.
I spent some of my life in New York, so yeah, I've been meaning to get out there. I have very close friends out there.
Awesome.
I'm from
Nah, next
Miami
time.
originally, so there's always been like that pipeline.
Nah, man. Anytime you're here, like, I mean, everybody has like that 1 degree of separation in New York, I feel like. But next time you're here, without question, like, I want to make sure I give you the tour of the space, and we have a bunch of good stuff coming here, new activations and stuff. So next time you find yourself in New York, hit me up.
Oh,
I'll
I'm
give you
gonna
the
take you up
full
on
tour
that.
of the museum.
I'm gonna take you up on that.
Awesome.
But so I'm looking at all your stuff. I'm looking at your page. I'm looking at all like your website. I'm looking at all the assets. And it made me realize that this is the way that I kind of learned about finances and how I learned about money. My dad, for whatever reason, like it was a different time back then, didn't really teach me about stocks. He didn't really teach me about collectibles or like even like saving money. Again, I'm from
Mhm.
Miami, so it's like a city that like very flashy, right? So
Yeah.
it's not really kind of consciously saving for the future. It's not like conscious minded of finance or like a savings account or the importance of stocks and like just investing. But I learned through collectibles. I learned through comic books. I learned through various things that kids learn about that was around my kind of ecosystem. So like sneakers eventually, and that's kind of how I kind of even like baseball cards and just collectibles, I would say, even antiques. There are a
Yeah.
lot of great like secondhand stores in Dade and Broward. Are people like me your main clientele?
I mean, that was you described like the archetype when we set this business up, and it was based on me more than anything else. And it's very much that. It's my I'm from Brooklyn, and Miami and Brooklyn are not that dissimilar. And Miami is basically like Brooklyn South for the most part. Like that was
Yes.
always a place where I would like me and my friends would go on vacation and be like, let's go to Miami for a weekend was always the thing. And it is this all the trappings of what you think wealth are when you're younger, and it's cars, and it's restaurants, and it's like everyone looks the part and they're dressed up. And that to me was like learning about finance was that for me the same way.
Yes.
Growing up, the earliest memories of like, there was a guy that had a Corvette that lived on my block when I was younger. And seeing that car, I thought it was worth $1 billion back then. And you realize like that becomes this aspirational goal. And I want to have this thing, and you get the models of it, and you read magazines about it when you're younger. And that became like the first time I was tying price to a thing. And then in my mind, I had to get the money to get the thing. And I think that's how a lot of people grow up. That's how we built this business, was all these aspirations that you have when you're younger. You can actually own it now, and not just own a piece of it, own the piece of the best example and real equity in it. And that's how we kind of put
Yeah.
the platform together.
And there are things that I would have never expected to be collectibles. Like I just want to go from like the micro Legend of Zelda original unopened game cartridges. I would have never expected. It makes perfect sense to me, but I would have never expected a market to open up for stuff like that. Like
Dude,
original Nintendo stuff. Like who knew?
same, same. And I think that that's part of what we try to get, what we try to put on the platform and what we try to really create events around are the things that were these aha moments as a kid, but now you realize how scarce and how important those actual items were. So they've kind of grown into collectibles over time. And I think part of like Zelda and Mario Brothers, and those are some of the most successful pieces of collectible memorabilia that have been on the platform, the ones that have provided the best returns for investors, but also the ones that are immediately recognizable. These massive franchises, and like Zelda as an example is this gold cartridge, and that was always this like really important thing when I was younger. That was the one that just felt like it was more important than all the others. So when you find, or when we kind of bring to the platform a sealed copy or a really highly graded one, or one that really went untouched and didn't see the light of day for decades, it's almost like, who was the psychopathic kid that got this and didn't rip it open and play it
Yes.
immediately? And that plays into why it's so important now. It's like the amount that they're never going to make these again. It's got the true scarcity. It's got this relevance. It's got something that nothing else has, which means there's, millions that were printed. There were 40 million Mario Brothers games printed. There's around 300 that are known to still be in sealed, good enough condition to
Wow.
be collectible. And when you think about that in terms of the numbers, that's a type of scarcity as a percentage that doesn't exist in any other collectible asset class. And it has an immediate nostalgia, but it's also not just relevant today. Zelda, Mario, Pokemon, these massive franchises from the 80s and 90s, they're still as important today as they were 20, 30 years ago. So we always look
Yes.
at it like it's going to be more relevant in the future, and they're not making any more. And that's where like you get that overlap of something that people care about and something that has all the trappings of true collectability. When you see a piece of art at auction, it has all those same check marks, and that becomes something really important for our investors.
So hold on one second. So there are really only 300 known left dead stock Super Mario game cartridges?
There's definitely more, but it's also like the numbers are not in my mind. This is a little bit based on opinion, a little bit based on fact. You're not going to find more than 1,000 that have any amount of the original seal on the
Right.
product. I think part of it was that this, $40, $50 game when we were younger was still a lot of money. But when you got it, it was like, that Christmas gift that you're not going to let sit there. You're not going to be, nobody was getting one and then getting another one to
Right.
save. Like now, the Apple Vision Pro came out and it's like everybody was asking me, like, should I get one to save? And in my mind, like, I can't see the future, but it's not the same. If you're getting it to save it, it's not the same as having gotten it and used it as a utility, not even thinking about the collectability of it. So even though the numbers are wacky with the 40 million that were printed and there's, 12, 13 different prints, a little bit more than that of the original Mario Brothers and from 1985. The first version, which was the test print, there's one of, from what I understand, that's still sealed. The second and third prints, you're talking about maybe less than a dozen, no question, probably less than 6 or 7. So the population reports come when somebody sends it in to get graded and get kind of wrapped in plastic and done in a way where it becomes a true collectible
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily need to get like, could be in the sun and not fade. Like it
Right.
becomes sort of encased. And
Right.
the amount that have been encased at this point is around 300. And that's, you got to assume that everybody makes up these things where like, oh, there's a box of those sitting somewhere. They made so many. That would be true if someone was thinking about saving it in
That's right.
1985.
That's
No
right.
one was thinking about saving that. Everyone was
People are
thinking about
thinking about
playing it.
saving the Vision Pro. The mere fact that you have, people that friends and associates asking you if you should save the Vision Pro completely negate like that. That says everything when
It
people are
changes it. It
speculating about
changes
stuff.
it.
Yeah.
It's also like, 40, $50 in 1985 was a lot of money. And for most families, they had kids that were, and I was one of them. I was, 2 years old. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But once I came of age and knew what video games were, I was begging my parents for whatever came out for like Mario Kart and all the ones
Yeah.
that came out for Super Nintendo. I was
Yeah.
begging. And for them, it was like, I got to spend $50 on this kid on this thing, but like he has to have it. If he doesn't have it, he's gonna get beat up or something. Like these
Yes.
kids are ruthless back then. It's like you had to be a
Yes.
part of that moment. So you get it, you rip it open, you call your friends, you start playing it in the basement, and it becomes like the thing. And that's what your life is kind of based around when you're 10, 12 years old. I
Yes.
think you don't really get now we're at a point that everything, I mean, first off, we live in a society where everything feels so disposable and modern products feel so
Mhm.
disposable. And so like they're not being created with shelf life in mind, but also everything feels accessible. So it's like I know a lot of people who just spent half of their liquid wealth on an Apple Vision Pro because it's like I gotta have it the same way that
Sure.
Apple did it with iPhones.
Sure.
That to me, and like I gotta save one or whatever. Like when it becomes this, when it changes and the dynamic changes, the narrative changes, and it becomes a consumer product that I feel like because I saw iPhone sales going crazy, I'm gonna hold on to this one. It's different when it's a $3,500 item. It's different when it's not the first or it's not really groundbreaking to the point that you feel like it's going to be bring on a whole entirely different sort of wave of development and process, which the Apple Vision Pro might in the future. But in terms of like collectability, you want one that wasn't even thought about as a collectible to start, and you want one that changes everyone's behavior. And when that happens, when you hit that sort of that critical mass of, oh, should have saved these. That happened with video games, I think, more than almost any other asset class because people were not thinking about it as an asset class at all.
At
Even
all.
like even the first iPhone, there were some people who had the vision to say like, this is about to change everything. I'm going to spend $500 and not open it. And that was a crazy moment. It feels maybe it's a fair imagination. It feels hard for me to think that most of the modern collectibles that we think of as collectibles now that have collectability and will be important in the future are going to see that same price movement as we saw from the original iPhones and some of these original video games.
Yes. So, I want to talk about the iPhone because I think that's wild too, because that's another thing where I'd never thought that that would be a
Never.
real asset, but it makes sense. But real quick, and then I want to move on from Mario. So you're kind of saying that like Mario can almost this first like if you have like a dead stock Super Mario cartridge or Zelda cartridge, that could one day be like an Action Comics #1. So you're almost it's almost like there are less copies of Super Mario that are dead stock than there are mint Action Comics in the world. And we saw what like the first appearance of Superman has done over time, first appearance of these superheroes. So like with Mario as it is now, like what is it, like 50 grand? What's like
Right
a
now, we
seal
have the
Mario?
world. We have the world record. Ours was a sixth print Mario that IPO'd for $150,000.
That
At
is
the time, it was the most.
unreal.
It's about to get more unreal. At the time, that was the most expensive Mario Brothers video game of any kind ever sold. Mario
Yeah.
Brothers obviously was going to take the crown. It was the first. And then a year later, we got a buyout offer for $2 million and sold it. So investors voted to sell it. It became the most expensive video game ever. And that to me is a title that the market retracted a little bit, and there was a lot of sort of conversation around what the future of video game collecting was going to look like.
Yes.
And there was two very distinct sides that were fighting, and it was just a lot of infighting in that community. So prices retreated a little bit. So $2 million for 9.8, the highest graded sealed copy of Mario, a sixth print. In my opinion, if one of those earliest first two prints, the sticker sealed versions, came to market right now, you might see a similar price. And I think in 10 years time, and it's not investment advice, you're going to see that those are going to mimic a lot of what happened in the comic book space,
Yes.
where the people who cared about it most are going to be like, 40s, late 40s, 50s, and they're going to say they're going to have some money and they're going to say, I want to own this thing. And there's not going to be enough supply to find the best versions. There's probably 15 or 20 of those really, really good, pristine versions from early prints that still exist. So to me, it's almost a franchise that to me is more important than Marvel or DC, and more of like in terms of staying power. Nintendo is still one of the biggest franchises on Earth, and it's still like theme parks and new video games are coming out. Like they're not new comic books, like there'll be new pieces to the franchise, no question. But as Nintendo evolves, they stayed very, very true to their roots of a video game console. And I think that that's a really important part of the tangibility of a lot of these collectibles that I think you're starting to lose a little bit with superheroes. Not to say that those Action Comics #1 and Amazing Fantasy 15, which is the first appearance of Spider-Man, and all these massive franchises won't be important. That first version, the first comic book paper version, won't be important in the future. I think prices are still going to be insane on a lot of those because the
Yes.
population is so low. But you have an equally low population on a lot of these video game titles, and in my mind, a way bigger addressable market. And there's still a lot of momentum behind it. I think a lot
Yes,
of
it's
what
still building. It's
it's
still
still
building.
building.
Yes. Whereas
All of
whereas
these,
comics have kind of like leveled off. Like it's unobtainable to get a first appearance of Superman now. Maybe, like it's still kind of it's very expensive when you say $2 million for Mario for a 9.8. But if you
yeah.
wanted, for somebody that has a certain amount of money and can, wants to get into something like that, like the buy-in seems like way more obtainable than getting into like the first appearance of Superman.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wanted when things started going crazy during COVID, and I've been a collector of everything my whole life, but inevitably, this part of the reason that we created Rally. When you first get into something, you're buying what a true collector, the purist, would say is like the bad version. It's the
Yes.
lesser quality version. It's the one you have access to. And then the first like a couple of big purchases I made that were probably a little bit uncomfortable for me at the time were video games, and it was a Super Mario Brothers. I wanted to get the whole Super Mario suite, so it was 1, 2, and 3. And
Whoa.
there's different nuance that goes with it. So with Super Mario Brothers 3, you want the word bros on the left. That's one of the earliest versions. For Super Mario Brothers 2, you want the circle seal, not the oval seal on the bottom. For Super Mario Bros. #1, you want a hang tab. You want like very specific elements that say this is one of the earlier, more important ones, the harder to get. So I was moving around and I was like, the Mario that I bought, which is an 8.5, was 12 grand. And at the time, that was a
A
lot of money.
lot, dude.
Yeah. The Mario Brothers 2 I bought was $6,000, and I
Yeah.
overpaid for it, but because I really wanted it. And then Super Mario Bros. 3, I got a couple versions. One that was one of the earliest prints, but not sealed, just the complete game
Yeah.
in box, and it ran me like 2,500 at the time for a really good version.
Uh-huh.
These to me were like big spends that when I'm buying equities or like buying crypto, it's a little different. I think about it purely as a financial play. But there was this emotional return for me on these other pieces, on these video games, where in my mind I was like, I'm okay spending the money, not looking at it and not knowing what the price fluctuation is for the next few years, because I
Uh-huh.
still believe in 10 to 15 years I'm going to still want this, but the value is going to be way, way higher. I think that you get that in a really unique way with a lot of these tangible collectibles that you
Yeah.
don't from equities.
That's incredible that you had the foresight to get into Mario.
I mean, it felt we have an unfair advantage because so many people come to us and they say like, we have this great thing. We feel like it's going to go up and it's going to be important for these
Yeah.
reasons. When that type of stuff, when the analytical data and like the information matches with intuition and with the things that I truly care about and know about that make me feel good from when I was a kid, it's automatic. So I'm almost like the predisposition is I'm going to spend more money than I should
Yeah.
right now on this. And I think that
Yeah.
happened for me. It happened with video games. It happened with watches. It happened with a few things where it goes back to that Miami thing where it's like, the things I wanted were the things I thought rich people had. But
Yes.
like the things that made me happy were like the things that I was around. Seeing that Corvette on the street was like a happy moment during the middle of the day. Playing video games with my friends like
Yeah.
after school was a happy moment. When those two things meet, it's foresight almost becomes like it gets thrown out the window. I've already got the data. I've got what I care about, and it's available to me right now. I got to spend a little bit more money than I should. If it goes up, it just reinforces that intuition. You know what I mean?
I love that. Which kind of leads to a question that I had. It's like, does enthusiasm for something, for collectibles, does enthusiasm for like cars, and I want to get into cars, but does that sort of like fervor for something to collect, does that come from inaccessibility? Does that come from like not being able to quite grasp it, so it becomes more of an aspiration, or is it more about passion above all?
Man, it's a good question because it's something I think about often too, and I think about it here whenever I buy anything for myself or whenever I get that we acquire something for Rally, or whenever like we sell something. We sold $1 million Lamborghini this morning, and it's a Lamborghini Countach where it's like it feels the part. The enthusiasm is definitely there, but all these
Yeah.
things, whether we get it, we sell it, whether I buy it personally, whether it's a gift, I always try and like anybody here around like the holidays when I'm buying gifts for my team, I'm always trying to find the thing that they care most about. Not just because I feel like they're great to have and they're great investments, but all of it, everything is this transfer of enthusiasm. And I think that that's been the most important part about building this platform is that we're able to, and I'm able to really key in on the things that I want and know where I want to spend money based on that amount of enthusiasm. It's like any other energy. It's this momentum that if you have something from the 80s, and a video game's a great example, that still has that momentum, it still creates that enthusiasm now. When you put it in somebody's hand, you see their eyes light up and their pupils dilate and they're holding on to something that they didn't think they would. Then you tell them the price. Like, yeah, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's almost like it changes the way they feel about it immediately in that moment.
Yeah.
And when you see that type of enthusiasm 30, 40 years later from the initial release of that product or of that item or of that collectible, then like you're onto something. I think that for us, creating that momentum wasn't in our hands. It's something that started for Mario Brothers in 1985. But we have the ability to tell a great story, to put the best version in front of people, and to get those reactions from real investors who are putting their money where their mouth is. And that momentum and that enthusiasm has to carry through. So anytime that we get anything for this platform, one of the big check marks is whether or not it's relevant right now, but
Uh-huh.
whether it will be relevant in the future. Because it's like any other energy.
Yeah.
It keeps moving perpetually until it gets stopped by gravity or some other momentum or some
Yeah.
other outside force. With so many things that we have on this platform, that outside force is still pushing from behind right now, and that enthusiasm is transferring every single time.
Yeah, it's crazy how the momentum carries for some of these things, and it's usually the stuff that people are kind of hoarding that doesn't retain value. I mean, there's always that stuff that people just catch the wave,
Yeah.
and it just never, it's just like nonstop. But like, there's other stuff where people are like, oh, you should collect this, and like it doesn't do like it's kind of just like no one really cares in the end, or it's mass
Yeah.
produced, or maybe the people that are doing it mishandle it, or for whatever reason. But watching how things bubble up to the surface is very exciting to me. Even stuff I don't even care about, but when I hear there's like a market that people have collect things about, like
Yeah.
that stuff jazzes me to no end. I love hearing
Nah,
about.
dude, absolutely. I'm looking at like I'm looking at the photos on the wall behind you, and I'm thinking like there's stories that go with each one of those things. You know what I mean? It's like
Yes.
it's that story is what carries. And I think that the good example, and we see it now, crypto, which is on another wave right now, is very much, and I've been in and out of every single token, every cryptocurrency
Were
for the
you like a
last.
business? Were you like a kid who like sold baseball cards in school and
Yeah,
stuff?
always. Absolutely. I
That
sold
was you?
everything. Like that was part
Yeah.
of it. And you
Yeah.
want to be like the alpha in the friend group. Like in 2015, when I'm begging my friends, I'm like, yo, listen, you have to buy Bitcoin right now. I can't
Yeah.
explain to you why it's going to go up, but I'm positive. I'm
Uh-huh.
positive. And part of it was like, it was hard to explain back then. And only two of my friends actually did it. And we still talk about it today. And the other 20 were like, yeah, maybe I got to set up
Right.
this Coinbase account, whatever. The problem is that like the transfer of enthusiasm was way harder for me because the masses lose interest when it gets too deep, and like the
Yeah.
purists take that as idiocy sometimes, where it's like I can't have to explain this to my grandmother, forget it, and they don't understand it.
Sure.
Crypto is like this run-on sentence, and these collectibles are an immediate aha moment. You don't have to explain anything, and I
Yes.
think that's part of what the easiest thing to explain to somebody is that like this baseball card, this Honus Wagner card from 1909 has never gone down in value, but there's a crazy story behind it. Let me tell you about it. And when they hear that, it automatically like translates. And sometimes crypto or trying to explain equities or things that are just a ticker symbol, they don't always translate the same way.
Yeah, there isn't that connection that inherently feel, or that aspiration, I guess, or
Yeah,
that thing
yeah.
that kind of, I don't
It's
want to say fills a
inexplicable. It's hard to
hole. It just,
explain.
say again.
It's hard to explain. Like it's that
Yes.
thing. It's the thing that it triggers something in your brain that says yes. And I think the more you have to explain it, the less likely that yes is the outcome.
Yeah, there's some type of, and I think about this a lot with my stuff. It's like, why do I just have something and it's like in a box somewhere? And it's like, well, when I there's some interaction, there's some spark that happens when I do have like a somewhat of a like a string tied to it, like a lifeline almost to it, a tether, so to speak. When I get things that I really want, like I feel an attachment, you know?
Absolutely.
And that's, I mean, I guess this goes back to the beginning where it's like, I don't have that for money in the bank. I've had to learn that.
So true.
You know what I mean? My money's always been on the shelf or something like that.
Nah,
And as
it's
I've
easy to
gotten older,
understand. That's it.
you know what I mean? And like growing up, I really never cared about that. But that kind of started creeping in as I've started to get older and like kind of reassess what I like to collect. And I've come out of the other side being like, no, I like collecting things. I like seeing things appreciate. I also like having things around me,
No,
you know?
there's a comfort level that goes with it. I'm the same as you. I think that everybody learns finance at their own pace, and at some point you're forced to. I think whether that's
Yeah.
for good or bad, either you get a huge check and you got to figure it out, or you run out of money, you got to figure out how to get more. And I think that that's
Yeah.
in major cities, and especially in these urban hubs that they're densely populated, where you're around so many different people and so many different things. You learn it at your own pace. But I'm in the same boat. Like my growing up, we were in an apartment. It wasn't My parents didn't own a house, so I wasn't thinking about like equity and mortgages and stuff
Right.
like that early on.
I grew up in
And then when you start
apartments.
to like, yeah, exactly. And then when you start, I go to high school. I'm at this prep school in Brooklyn, and it was like this whole other world, meeting all these people that in my mind knew money. Like I felt like they
Yeah.
understood what money was, and I didn't yet. I was still like a little kid, I felt like. And you start picking up on their cues a little bit, and your environment changes the way you think about money inevitably. But when we started this business, it became like the part of the logic behind it was exactly what you just said. Everybody's interested. Everybody has to be interested in money, whether they want to or not. We have a ton of first-time investors on Rally, people they maybe have a 401k, but were never actively trading stocks. They never traded crypto. Their first true investments they made were buying significant portions of an asset and a collectible that they understood. And I think when you understand it and you do it firsthand, it opens up the door to everything else. And now we're in this moment in time where it's back to throw a dart at the board. You might be able to make some money right now with crypto or equities, or
Hmm.
even you can get 5% right now if you want to, for very little risk. And you
Hmm.
could buy collectibles and you could do all these things that make it available to everybody for like for as little as $1. Everything is fractional now. You could do it on any app. I think you have to find your way in, and you have to find the thing that you care most about that makes sense to you. That becomes the first investment. Everything else opens and comes with it.
Yeah. What were the first few hits that you had when Rally started? What were the first few where it's like, yes, this is people, we're at the right place at the right time.
I
This is
think
working.
yeah, I think dinosaurs was the one that immediately opened up. Like we have a bunch of dinosaur fossils.
Oh, oh, oh,
I'm in our Soho Museum right now, and I'm looking at a Triceratops in the front of this place, and it's one of the most important Triceratops. It's called Deaton. Deaton is the guy who found it. So they always name it after like the geologist or the paleontologist. So
uh-huh.
we have Deaton. It's this giant 9 foot Triceratops skull. That's like 68% bone mass, and it's got a really complete front in all the right places. It looks the part. It's enormous. It's got huge horns. It's also one that when we were talking to Tom Lindgren, who's our paleontologist out in Arizona, he's a guy who cares so deeply about dinosaurs and fossils and meteorites and minerals. And he talks about it so passionately. And he hooked me in our first Zoom. He was telling me about like, life on the quarry and digging for dinosaur bones. And that's
Incredible.
something that it was such a good story. He's like, we got to bring the investors out here and do a whole thing. I'm like, you're absolutely right. We need to. And it brought me back to being like, in third grade, fourth grade, some of my earliest memories. You always learn about like dinosaurs, and then it's Jurassic Park. And so it
Hmm.
follows you forever. It's always relevant. When we did that IPO, it was a $350,000 IPO. It's trading somewhere around like 400 right now. I forget. But it brought out so many new investors, first time people,
Right.
questions that went to our customer service team, and then like friends that would come around. We did the launch for it. It would be in a room with a bunch of cars and Rolexes and everything else. And that became the immediate, like everybody looked at it, talked about it, and didn't even know that that was something that you could own. And I think that was like when it triggered, that was a hit
Yes.
in a way that it did, not just from a return perspective, but it made people really excited about what we were doing, and it opened up people's minds to alternative assets. And then backing into it, we realized that there was a really, really important tech billionaire was trying to outbid us for that particular Triceratops.
Uh-huh.
And Tom, the
Wow.
our geologist paleontologist, came back and he was like, you know, he'd rather have it be somewhere that's not with some billionaire in his living room. It could be here and people could see it and have a conversation around it. I
Yeah.
think that for us was like a transitional moment and a real kind of a seminal moment for the platform where it became something that opened people's minds to say like, yeah, I guess I kind of understand like watches and wine and collector cars. Those are trappings of wealth that rich people have. But like people are into dinosaurs, and that
Right.
became like this thing that opened up the door.
Yeah.
That was our like fourth or fifth category on the platform. Now we're in 25 different categories of assets, and that one was the first trigger to open up all the other ones.
Dinosaurs. When you said that, I'm like, what was there? Is it
That
like a
was that was the immediate
merch?
reaction. Like everybody's thing was like dinosaurs. Really, I'm like, yo, listen, like Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the biggest dinosaur collectors on earth, and Nicolas
That's
Cage had
awesome.
one in his living room, and like Jeff Bezos loves that. Like the whole thing became a way easier conversation once people saw it in person. And I think that
Yeah.
that was like the biggest thing for us.
Oh, that makes sense. Collecting dinosaurs and fossils and stuff. That makes, but like, do people really have like reconstructed pieces of dinosaurs as collectibles? Like they kind of get all the different parts or as many as they can to put it
Yeah, I
together.
think
Is
that
that a real
it's
thing?
there's one quarry, I believe it's in North Dakota, that a mutual friend has that's only Triceratops, and it's nothing else but
Wow.
Triceratops. Rob's like T-Rexes are the when you ask a kid about a dinosaur, it's like T-Rex, Brontosaurus, Triceratops, and that's it basically. But
Yeah.
T-Rex is like the king, literally. So getting like getting full skulls and full bodies and fossils is really tough right now. So a lot of times what you'll
Sure.
see, they'll measure it based on like the bone, the true bone mass. The rest will kind of be plaster. They'll put it together.
Yeah.
But if you can get like over 50% bone mass on anything, it's kind of a win. And they'll like Frankenstein different T-Rexes
Sure.
together sometimes, make really cool ones. But it's become this thing where I think it's like you know, I don't have enough money to have to be in that conversation, but I think the true wealth, like when they start running out of things to buy, it's like what's the aha moment where somebody walks into my house and they want to talk to me about something. And I think dinosaurs are quickly becoming that. And it's also something that when you tell somebody when people see this Triceratops that we have in our museum and they ask how much it costs, and I say, yeah, it was around like 300 grand. They're like, oh, I would have assumed 1 million. Like, because
Yeah.
who
Right.
has a dinosaur? It always seems like it's worth $1 million. I think that's part of the trigger for a lot of people too.
A fossil is a real flex, I do have to say.
Man, I hope I get to a point one day that I could put one in my living room and
Yes.
you walk into the foyer and you see a dinosaur and have to explain it. That's when you know you
Yes.
made it.
That's balling. So it must vary the people that invest in these properties, right? It's all sorts. If the concept is you can own a part of it, it's not just reserved for people that are, bankers or stuff like that. It really is enthusiasts.
Yeah, I mean, we thought early on, like I thought it was going to be kind of what we discussed, where it's this persona of like, young professional, understands what the future looks like, but really respects the past, is going to invest in these things and buy these assets that they knew about from a kid and that they couldn't get their hands on the best ones. And we have them.
Mhm.
What inevitably happened was that this became this kind of gateway for a lot of people who are driven by passion, who have their thing. I think it was never going to be like, we always thought someone comes in and buys everything that, every different asset in every different category. What we've seen is that they pick their two or three that matter most, and those are the ones they go deep on to start. That's always driven by passion. Inevitably, over time, they'll see like one or two things that, whether it's a buyout that comes into the platform or whether it's some other asset that's tangentially related to the thing they care most about, and they'll make a small investment there, and it quickly becomes a real investment product for them. And they started thinking about arbitrage opportunities in the secondary market, and they started thinking about, all right, I'll do the research on this thing I don't know a ton about, but it looks like a really interesting purchase. And then they become like real, what I would call like real investors. So that passion is kind of like what leads them to rally. But you'll get everything from an 18-year-old to an 80-year-old inside of, a modern collectible that makes sense to them in their own way. And we've seen like a lot of diversification in terms of those demographics, age groups, where they come from, what their background is, and what they think about this platform. And they all kind of turn into the people who stick around are the ones that turn into really sophisticated investors pretty quickly once they make that first passion-led investment.
Yeah, I feel like when you see that kid who's like 7 years old, 8 years old, selling baseball cards at school or erasers or pencils, I feel like it's like that same mentality. Like that mentality doesn't go away. They just get older and their palette kind of expands, right? I mean, when you're dealing with some of these clients, are you just like, oh, I recognize immediately, regardless of like the socioeconomic um position that they're in, it's the mentality of somebody that has like that collector mind of acquiring things, knowing things that will appreciate over time, knowing things that are new classics, so to speak. Know people that kind of know um, about taste. I guess that's what I'm
That
getting at.
taste to me is more important. We don't have like purists that come to rally that have spent their life obsessing about one specific thing are never going to be the people that stick around on our platform. And I think that part of it is that purists have changed over time. I think that we've seen this world where as we move further away from analog and further into a digital future, a lot of people are offended by it. And I think people that care the most feel like they have to protect their thing and they
Yeah,
hold on to it for dear life. And anybody else that comes in has to prove their intentions are pure and not driven by commodification, or they're not going to be accepted. I think that's the mistake that a lot of collectors, that people that call themselves collectors, make. Because if you want that thing that you care about, that you care deeply about, that you base your life on, to have legs and have a shelf life that lasts longer than you need new people who think about it differently than you do to
yeah.
care about it just as much. And I think you
I
only
could,
get that in some cases when you open up the market. And I'm not trying to act like we're some charity here. This is a for-profit business, and I care as much about the collectibles as I do about the business at this point. But that said, the things that I care about most, some of the stuff is worth nothing. Some is worth lots of money. None of it is a conversation I want to have with somebody who doesn't want me to be in that conversation. So the communities that accept those new groups of people, a lot of whom start their journey on Rally, are the ones that in my mind are going to be the most important in the future.
what about so back to this Countach thing? What are some of those cars from that era that are also? I mean, the Countach has always been on that pedestal
Yeah.
since
I
like
mean,
the
there's like
'80s.
it just represents something that no longer exists. It's a moment in time that
Yeah.
design was wacky. That car is not even drivable. Like I don't drive any of the cars that we have because secretly I actually do not know how to drive stick. That's the first time I've ever said that publicly. So I mean that's a little bit of embarrassment. And I don't want to mess up the things that we have. And I feel like learning on on $1 million Ferrari or Lamborghini is not the right way to do it. But there was this moment in time in like the 80s through I would say mid 90s where design in general was trying to find its footing, and it was so off the wall, and it was this post 80s
Mhm.
post punk, like it was this grunge era was approaching. Anything went. And I think part of it was that you saw these like car design and sneaker design to me always lead, and they kind of work hand in hand in a
Yeah.
lot of different cultural spots.
Hmm.
But car design became like, even for supercars, let's get insane. And from that era, you have a bunch of supercars that now are remarkably important. It's the Ferrari Testarossa with those crazy cuts in the side. You have the Lamborghini Countach, which is this wild boxy design that looks and feels like someone, was on drugs and designed a razor blade. Like I don't know how to even describe what it is. You
Yeah.
have the Jaguar XJ220, which is on rally as well, which is more of a 90s car. People think about it as, but it was this supercar that looked and felt like a boat that just made no sense in terms of like the
Yes.
lineage of Jaguar at that point. You have some of the European car makers that are kind of less, that are not looked at the same, like Lotuses and a few others that started popping up in movies. And they were like these design, these really low bodies with really wide stances. All that design was so unique at the time, and the cars were so powerful for their era, and they really drove. It was that mix between like finesse and power that you had to pick a side. Now it's mostly finesse, and the Ferraris that come out now and the Lamborghinis that come out now are could be daily drivers. These
Yes.
were not that. They were like drive straight really, really fast, hug the ground on turns, and they look and feel like nothing you've ever seen before. So when you look at like Instagram now, the aesthetic that is always relevant is that like 80s and 90s cars. Those are the
Yeah.
accounts those are like the accounts, these niche accounts that get massive, massive views and massive engagement, regardless of their follower count, because that design, that aesthetic, that look and feel will translate forever. I think
Yeah.
The Lamborghini Countach is literally the poster on the wall car, but that's the poster for that entire era when it comes to design that was insanely unique and impossible to recreate.
I'm glad that you mentioned some of these like kind of more obscure European sports cars because there's I've seen over the years so many flops that are gorgeously designed,
No question.
but they're totally they're totally inefficient to drive. So it's almost like they were built to collect. So it's so
Yeah.
cool to kind of see all those cars kind of come into their own in a sense of appreciation as a collectible because it almost seemed like when they were around the first time around like they weren't real cars. They were
So true.
very specific. They were
They were
for like
almost trophies, It's like
yes.
it's a thing that it's something that we don't. I hate to be that guy and like age myself, but it's like we don't have that now. So when I see like Rivians on the street or the Tesla truck, or like you see these cars that I think are celebrated as being different. A lot of it is not built in my mind with the future in mind. It's built with like a right now in mind. I think that the
Yes.
risks that were being taken with design in the late 80s and early 90s were about, all right, we're going to make something right now that's going to be a little bit insane. It's going to be just as insane 20 and 30 years from now. This
Yes.
isn't the direction that like this concept is not the direction where the entire world is going, but it doesn't matter. We're going to pinpoint this moment in time and make it so unique that it's going to be impossible to ignore. I think
Yes.
we get so much less of that impossible to ignore now, and I miss it a little bit.
And at the time, when I was a kid, the way to kind of justify not being able to have a Countach is like, oh, well, they break down anyway. Like, oh,
Yeah,
like the brakes,
yeah,
the brakes, like
that's
they
the
don't
reason,
work.
definitely.
Like you can't really drive it, so like whatever.
Yeah, so
So
true.
as a collectible, like that's pretty cool now. So you
It's
said
yeah,
something
that's
interesting,
awesome.
which is also something in my notes. Because like, what about like Nissan Altimas from the 90s? What about like Honda Civics from the 90s? Like there are
Yo,
tons of cars like that are more kind of like a working class design that has somehow come out on top in terms of aesthetics. Like some of those like just straight up sedans are really like from a design standpoint, and I'm sure a collectability standpoint must be like a real kind of gem, right?
nah,
Even like I
that's
mean, Grand Nationals are another thing, but like I said, Honda Civics or like some of these Nissans, maybe even like some Celicas, right?
nah, dude. That's like the seeing Grand Nationals on the street when I was younger was like a ghost. Like that was just the
Yes.
craziest moment. And seeing some of those early versions go for 80 and $90,000 is insane to me now. But
Yes.
more insane is that like, we have a $40,000 Mazda Miata on rally because it had
Right.
400 miles and it still had the stickers on it. It was owned by one family in Cleveland. It's almost like we've gotten to this point where everybody takes, whether it's fashion, art, design, product, digital, physical, everybody takes their cues from the past. It's the easiest place to get inspiration to create a mood board from. And that, once Gorecore and all these different sort of fashion, once fashion became open for a kid to decide what the future is going to look like, which happened in the
Yes.
last, I would say, 5 years.
Yeah.
And this cycle of 80s and 90s came back really, really strong. And people started taking their design cues from the past. They started looking more at, to your point, the accessible, what was considered like accessible luxury. And when I was younger, it was like, there were certain Mitsubishis that were crazy and like
Yes.
Toyota 4Runners. And
Yes.
there were these like aha moments to me in the 90s that were like, man, I didn't even know what the badge of the car was. I just knew it looked the part. There was like a Diamante and like there were random cars. I think
Huh?
growing up in an Italian neighborhood in Brooklyn,
Yes.
like you see a few specific things and like certain Mitsubishi Monteros and like you look
Monteros.
at them now when really clean versions come to auction, there's obviously way more kids that were like me that have a little money now and see it go across an auction block and all of a sudden you see a price get printed on like a really clean Forerunner from
Yes.
like the first year. And it's like that just went for $40,000. You get a new one
Yes.
for like 45,000. It's
Right.
crazy to me. But
But the
that
design is
became important
gorgeous.
and it's not going away. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
design that now I think that everything, the information is so much more accessible that asymmetry between knowing something and really, really understanding it
Yeah.
has disappeared. And now you can get you get access to the information, you hear the stories behind it. It makes like a 16-year-old with a following way more important when they could show like someone a Nissan or a Toyota 4Runner and say like, yo, this is what it was like back then. It's starting to come back around now. We should really push this
Yes.
narrative and it works.
It's like the Bronco, and that I feel like that time is past. Like you can't get in a Bronco for a decent amount of money. Like that kind of thing is happening and exploded. It's hard to get
Nah,
in.
Ford, yeah, Ford decided like post OJ, they were like, we're gonna make this our thing. We're gonna go deep on it. We're gonna electrify it, and we're gonna do this, and this. And now
Yeah.
like vintage Broncos, if you go anywhere on the East Coast where there's any money, like you go to the Hamptons and it's a mix. Everyone's either got like a Range Rover, a Porsche, or like a '79 Bronco that's been like resto mod. You know what I mean? Like
It's
it's
like
just
Malibu out here. The
it's
flex in
Malibu.
Malibu is
It's the
Bronco.
exact yeah, it's
Yeah.
exactly how many times you go to like, the Malibu market and you're seeing like top off Broncos like in
Yes.
orange waiting in the parking lot. There's like
Yeah.
20 of them. You know what I mean? It's
Dope, but like it's a thing now.
100%.
But what about like Mustangs? Have they gone anywhere? Have they kind of started appreciating like those 90s
There,
before they
you know what?
redid
There's
it in the 90s, like that early kind of 92
Yeah,
Mustang?
nah, we have them. Like we have one on rally right now. It's this crazy green one that was part of a Sprite contest for college basketball that went crazy. And there's like 15,000 of them, whereas normally there's going to be hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
Mustangs made. But that's like we're getting there. I think it's way easier for people to wrap their head around European cars. It's way easier to look at like a E30 M3 or any of these cars from like that were really that felt like new money back then. They felt like you would see like this BMW convertible in somewhere, you know, tropical, and someone pop out of it with money. Those still have a lot of the attention right now. And when you see like a Tyler the Creator or Frank Ocean use like a BMW M3 as like an album cover.
Yes.
Those are these cultural cues that the Mustang hasn't gotten yet. Like the Mustang hasn't gotten that pivotal moment where it switches from something everybody recognizes to something everybody kind of wants in an
Yes.
aesthetic or in a car. I think we're probably approaching it, but I think part of the problem was that, you know, in the 60s and 70s, Mustangs weren't made to they weren't made for like, I don't want to say families, but there was no finesse to it. It was drive straight in a straight line, really, really fast,
Right.
and like burn rubber. You know what I mean? And it had this Americana piece to it. Aston Martin stole that whole vision for a minute with their version of their V8, and it became like Europe just took over at that point. And then it became race cars that you could drive on the street, and that's what Ferrari, Lamborghini, everything's always done. And Mustang was always still like this second tier, and Ford always had this
Yes.
second tier cars. It's
Yes.
gonna be there at a certain point. I think a lot of those like the LXs and like those 5.0
Yes.
versions of Mustangs are just like a very, very specific moment in time that'll come back around at some point. It's not quite there yet.
I remember my brother, I asked because my brother had a Mustang when he turned 16 and he like got way into it and he had friends that like
Yeah.
were about like taking it and racing them, but he also had friends that were into the certain styles. Like there was a certain model that only the police had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you like if you can get one of those, like that was like highly coveted.
Still, that's still one of those things. Like this is true for anything collectible. It's a car or anything else. No matter what, there's a version. If it's something that people care about, that a mass group of people care about and are talking about, and there's always those people. There's always the alpha, the one person who's like, I'm gonna make this mine. That's gonna be my
Yes.
identity. There's always a tribe that has that same feel and wants that same identity.
Yes.
And there's always the one version within that whole construct
Yeah.
that's the one you really want, that was really low numbers, is super scarce, you don't see often. But then, like when it pops up on Reddit or TikTok or Reel somewhere, all of a sudden it has like a million views because that was the one. It was a bigger community than people thought. I think we're starting to get closer to finding like that needle in the haystack is getting easier and easier and easier for each one of these verticals. And Mustang's like the perfect example of it.
Yeah, I feel like that hasn't had its day yet. Like the
Not
Mustang.
yet. It's coming. Everything comes for everything. You know, what I
Yeah.
mean? Every single thing that was mass market has its day to come back around. We're on these 23 and like 26-year cycles right now where, you know, it's 2001 again right now in Soho. You walk around Soho and it's like, damn,
Is it?
I remember that from high school. You know what I mean? Like I'm seeing it again now. It's inevitable.
How's that feel? How's that make you feel? I have my
Man,
own thoughts about it.
it makes me feel old, but it makes me feel like I should have more money. I should be capitalizing on this. I lived it. I know it. Like I know it so well. It was my entire life, and I was a designer my whole life, and I was always like drawing or writing or trying to understand trends. For me to not be a billionaire right now, based on the fact that I lived through a moment that every single, you know, Gen Z and Gen Alpha wants, is concerning to me right now, to be honest.
Isn't that's funny and that's such a good take. But isn't that why it's hitting again? Because people didn't hold on to it?
I mean, I'm washed. Like I don't know anymore. It's the point. But at least what I see, it's really, really hard. I think I look at things like, I try and distinguish what's good and bad based on some element of like what I know to be true. And that goes for art, and everything's kind of art. So it goes for art and collectibles specifically. But I think good art versus bad art has gotten like way less subjective because so many people have a platform now.
Yes.
And what we see now is that like, you know, it's never okay to randomly like criticize and say you don't know what you're talking about, but it's okay to critique. And when I see certain things and I'm like, that's not really going to work for a little while, and all of a sudden it does, I realize that I might be on the outside of that bubble now for a little bit. I think like, to talk like a real old man, like kids these days, they take everything as a personal attack. I think so. When I talk to like, I try and keep as many 21-year-olds around me as possible because they see the future better than I do. They'll have ideas and they'll try and do stuff, and I'll like try and talk them off certain things sometimes. But when they get 80, 90,000 likes on something, like what are they gonna listen to me for? Like they don't need to listen to me anymore. I'm trying to explain. I think that there's a big difference between like noise and a signal, that you should be doing something like that. Like that's a place to go for your business or for your future. I think it's becoming harder to distinguish for me when what's going to hit. I could look at something and say that's bad art and be confident in the outcome, but I can't look at things and say like that's not going to hit anymore. I think that's what kids get now. because they're able to pick and choose that stuff from the 80s and 90s that resonates with them better
Yeah.
than I can, you know?
Yeah, and also like I think about the same thing a lot, like yeah, seeing a cycle come back around, and it's really like it's been like the first time I've seen that. I mean, it's been a few years since I probably had the epiphany, but the I always it made me recognize how much when I was a younger person, when I was a younger kid, how I didn't think things would ever come around. It was always going to be new and things would always build on top of that, that cycles didn't really exist, that this was it and it only gets different and novelty
Yep.
only increases from here on in. Seeing us living through a cycle coming back around again was kind of like a real kind of revelation for me, in the sense of, first of all, recognizing my own past, but also what to carry forward.
Mm.
So when you start talking about like how, kids can recognize what was cool, or they can pick what's cool from a timeline in their own way, in the same way we can carry through time those cool things as well. So it's that hard kind of relationship that you have as you go through time, where you start saying like, oh, well, do those kids have something that I don't? Or, and then you fall into the trap of, oh, I have to keep up with that, which is, that'll get you just going in circles over
Impossible.
and over again. But
Yeah.
like being able to go through time, that's kind of what something that was the kind of the gem that I picked up from that revelation of like, oh, no, I can just take what I had and push through time that way, while other people are just discovering some of the stuff from the past. But
That's true.
it's also cool to interact with younger people who are interacting with the past, namely my past or our past,
Mm.
and recognize like, oh, they're right. Like that stuff was awesome. Like maybe some of the stuff that like I wasn't into at that time, maybe I should reconsider, because there's
No
other people
question.
that are cool, that are into it. So
No
that's kind
question. That's it. That you hit it on the head. That's where I've started to realize like the older I get, the more I was always against this word like curation. I always look at like because it feels so easy. It's just everything is like a version of a Tumblr page again now. But you get to a
of
certain age, you become more of a curator than a creator. And a lot of it comes down to like how good are you at articulating a thought into one sentence as opposed to making something from scratch and trying to force it down people's throats to like it. And it's just not going to
yeah.
be, I'm not going to be able to do that because we lived through it. So in my mind, like, should JanSport backpacks and like JanSport strings be like a thing again? Like, I don't know. Are people going to use Trapper Keepers again? Probably not. Like, I don't,
Hey,
but
my
like in my
nine-year-old
mind,
daughter
like,
has a JanSport. My 9-year-old daughter has a JanSport. She
there you
loves
go.
Trapper Keeper.
There you go. So maybe exactly. I got it wrong again. I don't
Yes.
know, but I know that like I buy so many things that trigger this emotion for me. I'm all over eBay and like I'm in our recording studio in our museum right now, and there's like two big shelves behind me, and they four of them actually. That's all stuff from my apartment basically that like there was no room for anymore.
Yeah.
Some of it's worth money, some of it's worth absolutely nothing. All of it was a moment in time. I have no idea whether or not it's gonna be important in the future, but I know that I didn't not want it. I wanted to have it.
Yeah.
These kids now, like they think about it as like it's social currency. And like when they get it and make it a thing, they won. I don't know how to win that game anymore. Like I'm not trying to I'm
Right.
gonna slowly try to I'm trying to like be around the players in that game and just coach a little bit where I can, but I'm not in that game anymore, you know?
What have you seen? Like, what's the stuff that's, for, I feel like our generation, like the mainstream thing was baseball cards.
Yeah.
Pre-internet, it was baseball cards. Like you had fringe comic book people, or like, Dungeons and Dragons guys, maybe action figure collectors, not really, but that kind of came later, a little bit later. But like, what are the people collecting now? Is it still sneakers? Like, what's
I
the
think
entry?
yeah, I mean, you see, it's again like everything feels so disposable right now. So collecting is different. It's not. I think what the one thing I've seen in sneakers is the example when I started really caring about sneakers in 2000, like when I started really having money to buy sneakers was like 2005 ish,
Mhm.
six.
Mhm.
And I was trying to create relationships at like different sneaker stores in New York to make sure I can get all the good stuff.
Huh?
To me, that was like I was wearing everything and I threw the boxes out immediately and just wore
Right.
them. And a lot of that stuff's expensive now, but I wasn't thinking about it as an investment. Then there was a window of time where everything was an investment, and sneakers were the perfect example where no one touched anything, wrapped them in plastic, kept them out of the sun, and we're holding on to them in StockX and Goat and all those companies kind of sprang out of that. I think we went full circle back to like the things I collect are on me and I'm wearing them or they're part of what I wear. So there's this dichotomy right now that's happening in Soho as an example where, I know a lot of the kids in this neighborhood and like they're all different companies and startups and retail spots and coffee shops or whatever. And you see them in the street and you inevitably have a conversation. I know what they make. And like when I see one of them with like a $15,000 watch on, I'm just like, what? What? But they think about commerce so differently too. They buy things like that knowing that A, they want it. but B, that it's like a bank account and they could sell it again in the future they want to, but they're not thinking about like holding on to it. And then they'll stack that with like, a shirt from, H&M or something like that, like a t-shirt, or like something they got on Amazon. They'll wear Amazon Essentials sweatshirts. Like all that type of stuff is so uniquely different than what I would have
Yeah.
expected. Where when we were younger, it was like if you were a kid wearing all designer stuff, like I didn't even know you, but also that was like your whole life. And now it's not. Now it feels like luxury is more accessible, but the ability to go really, really low and own something that might be worthless in terms of dollar value, but you can put it together as part of that whole aesthetic is something that's way more prevalent now than ever before, especially in downtown New York.
That's wild to think about that. But
It's a
I get
crazy
it.
world.
I get it. Like, you put all that money into a watch, if you're savvy enough, you understand resale value, and there are all those avenues that open up. So I get it. I mean, I'm sure the kids look at savings accounts now and they're like, why would I do that when I can flip watches or flip artwork or,
Nah, you kidding me? They're
XYZ?
buying meme coins, man. They're trading like, Nick tokens and random and whiff and like these ridiculous meme coins that are just like gonna go to zero at some point. But right now it's their flip. And at the same time, like when they make an investment, it's very much in themselves. They'll buy like $6,000 Chrome Hearts jeans, and I
Right.
don't understand it. I wouldn't do it,
Right.
but I don't understand it, but I get it. Like I'm starting to get it a little bit more because it's part their identity is their investment, and I think that you see like they're not worried about spending if they have $10,000 to their name, spending 7,000 today. It's not something they think about the way that I would right now, even
Not at
myself.
all. I guess that goes back to the beginning of this conversation where like I didn't know about finances, but I learned through things. Kids are learning in the same way. It's just a
Yep.
different now it's just clothes and designer stuff.
It's still no matter what though, it's still that every transaction is that transfer of enthusiasm. And if
Yeah.
like they're as excited about it as the people that see it, will see them wearing it or see them having it are excited about it, or see when they put on Instagram, people go crazy about it. That enthusiasm maintains, and that's when the value and the price maintain too. So like they're not worried about the same things that we worried about when we were younger. They're not worried about they'll live in an apartment with 10 kids and have a $10,000 thing like in a minute. Like they would do that now more than ever.
That is insane. It
Yeah.
sounds fun.
I wish I could take my brain out of my head and replace it with one that's that carefree. It would
Yes.
change my entire life.
Do you have any early Chrome Hearts? Like, is that like the next kind of market?
I don't know, man. It's hard. It's still like we try and go into more at Rally at least, and me personally trying to go into markets where I have like a little bit of a true understanding and some sort of like key into an expert or somebody who I really trust in the space who can guide me a little bit. Because I'm trying to be less selfish and like less egotistical and think I know everything, especially with this type of stuff because the
Yeah.
market's changing so rapidly. But it's hard for me to wrap my head around it without completely understanding it. The prices to me still seem so crazy relative to the product that I think for me, I need a little more expert opinion in my life around it. But it's without question something that you see, some of the biggest watch collectors in the world that I know, people that have insane collections. I'll never see the light of day. Car collectors too. They're collecting like really early chrome hearts, and it's a lot of it is like the jewelry and a lot of the early denim, and it's leaning closer and closer and closer to what I consider a collectible asset class based on the group of people that are paying attention to it now. Because you still have the kids that are here running to blue and green and all like the spots in downtown that are like the really core places that you go if you have money to shop, like Patron the New and places that have access to all the inventory of the best stuff. They're going there and dropping bags of money on it.
Yes.
And at the same time, the very high end of the collector world are doing the same thing. So that to me means like there's somewhere in the middle that we need to be as a platform.
Now, the kids that are going out and buying the more contemporary stuff, there are more numbers of those produced, I imagine, right? Now Chrome is probably just pumping stuff out, whereas before, wasn't it a smaller operation? Like this
Yeah,
is another thing where like I didn't expect Chrome Hearts to be a thing again. Like for me, it was kind of
never.
like, I mean, it's cool, don't get me wrong, I get it. It took people to reinterpret it for me to recognize this. It's not my thing. But I always kind of considered it as like cheesy Hollywood kind of
Same.
gear.
I thought it was like Nick Cage. You know what I mean? That's how I always thought about it. Yeah, I thought it was Nicolas Cage. Like that's the first thing I thought like dripped out.
Yeah.
And then when it started to change, when that narrative changed, and I think that like a lot of trends, when like Japan starts caring with their wallets, is when like people start paying attention differently to design and to
Yeah.
collectability. That happened in a hurry, and now like really really well known and big watch collectors in Japan started popping up on the radar with really insane like vintage chrome stuff, and I started paying attention
Cool.
to it more. And they're replacing in the one of one Submariner bracelets with Chrome Hearts bracelets on their watches, and I started
Wow.
realizing like this is way more important than I thought it was. And
Yes.
then now I see a kid in the street that you wouldn't pick out for a minute, saying like that person has money, wearing a pair of $10,000 jeans. And I'm like, oh Jesus, this is we're in it right now. So it's
Yeah.
like the moment comes really, really quickly. I miss the moment personally. That's why like I never invested in it
Yeah.
because I feel like I missed the moment and I'm chasing now. And without hearing a little bit more and understanding it better, it's hard for me to not think it's not chasing.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right. It would be a chase. Like that's wild. Like Chrome Hearts denim, I could see that being like a collectible, like all those crosses and stuff and all the bedazzled stuff. Like who knew?
Yeah,
Who
but then you
knew?
look at it, it's got the same dynamics of like vintage Levi's have always been a thing. And
Yes.
if when it has provenance and it has a story that goes with it, people realize like this isn't going to be made again. The way they made this back then is was entirely different. The shelf life, literally and figuratively, of these items is way, way different than the new
Yes.
stuff. And there's something for everybody. And the you go on Reddit and you look at any of these subreddits around like Chrome Hearts is the example, vintage Levi's, vintage 501s, any of the stuff where you're like, yeah, there's probably a small group that cares about it. And then you see 100,000 people having a conversation about it and you realize
Yes.
like how big it actually is, you know?
Yes. And the way it's this is like a great example of something that takes time to appreciate because it needs to go away and it takes people
Yeah.
to incorporate it back into like the modern aesthetic. Like it almost takes like a this is an overstatement, like a visionary to kind of be like, oh, I can couple this style, this, that was kind of discarded and kind of reinterpret it in a new way and kind of make it all that it possibly could have been uh, now as compared to what it was in the past.
That's so on point. You described our logo. The rally logo is this R that starts as a script and it goes down, then comes back and connects with the Y. And that little trough represents when like the interest goes away and someone picks it up and takes it back. Like that was like the
Reinterprets it, yes.
yeah, that was like the the Ogilvy version of our brand mark that I put together a long
Very
time ago.
cool.
But the thought process around that is exactly that. And I think that that's to me what's when I say like what's missing with kids right now. They buy things, it's a mix of utility and aesthetic, and it's something they want to hold on to. But it takes somebody or something to do that work that you're talking about to make something relevant again. It's going to be relevant once it hits the mass market, but it always takes a little bit of a push. And I think that, we saw it with like Michael Jordan with the documentary, with the Last Dance documentary during COVID, and then Michael Jordan stuff boomed again. You have a whole new generation who only knew him for his sneakers, now knows a little bit of the story.
Yeah.
Prices go crazy, new things start coming out. It becomes more of a conversation piece. Prices, get to a point that they're at all-time highs for every single aspect, even the stuff that's not necessarily super collectible, because it took a little bit of work. It took a team to make a documentary and put it back in the zeitgeist again for a new generation. I think that the big difference with like kids today, they don't you do a little bit of work, they think it's magic. Like they don't want to put the work in. They want to wear stuff and then move on to the next, move on to the next, move on to the next.
Right.
Certain things are getting sticky by accident. They don't even realize it. Chrome Hearts is like the example of that to me.
What's do you see any trends that like maybe they're missing out on? We talked about how like, the shell shock of seeing people younger than you making moves that you would have never expected. But do you see any trends that maybe they're not picking up on? Like any contemporary things that are happening now that you could see as something to hold on to? Not for just to poach or to resell, but if you're
I don't know, man.
into
I think,
collecting stuff.
yeah, I think that there's the one thing that's, I think the risk taking is with like fashion is at an all-time high. But I think the risk taking with some of the stuff that maybe they should be paying a little more attention to isn't happening as much. I think that it's just jumping from one to the next to the next. Going deep on one thing is what's going to pay dividends a lot of times. And that's like, you're taught to diversify early on, but in reality, like having conviction and going really deep on something and not just buying the one available, but like getting on that plane and going. So if you really want to hold on to something forever, get on the plane and going somewhere and getting the best version. That's the one thing that got lost in this is a very broad stroke answer, but in this disposable society that we live in right now, where everything
Yeah.
feels like on to the next, and the trends are this, like the window is this big to get in on a trend, and
Yeah.
it goes from random NPC ice cream so good straight into the next whatever the next
Mhm.
wave is, and the next wave and the next wave, and you got to keep up and keep up and keep up,
Yeah.
and music changes so dramatically. It's individuality is lacking a little bit, no question, because you got to just go next, go next, go next.
Yeah.
But buying the best and having the best version and find that best version is something that no one really cares about. Sneakers are the example. Like fake sneakers when I was younger was a sin. And now it's like they're called reps. It's like
Yeah.
a replica sneaker. It's from the same factory, got rebranded, and it's just like you can't be wearing that in the street. And you see like these watches, these crazy super dupes that come from like clone watches that come from China. now that like you can't until you check the serial number, you wouldn't know that that paddock is a fake paddock. It's not the same. It's not a real Aquanaut, and that like you can't notice, and real even dealers can't notice. And like
You don't
moissanite
notice if
diamonds
I'm like
show up on
this
their
on
diamond
Instagram, right?
testers.
If I'm sitting on
Yeah,
Instagram
yeah,
like that, no one knows.
nah, no one knows. And that part of it, I think, is where it's lost. It's like they're this new generation are consumers, no question. They'll spend money, but they're not as concerned about getting the version that that is almost a lock to maintain its value and maintain the appreciation cycle. And I think that they're more into like they got okay with fake stuff. And I think that's the one thing that's a little bit crazy to me still. And the fakes are so good that it's really, really hard for me to argue with it and say that they're wrong.
In a lot of ways, I feel like a lot of people are shooting themselves in the foot down the road because of, especially like with shirts and some of the stuff that some of the designers that are putting out stuff now or streetwear stuff like that. Some of these T-shirts, they're just on bad blanks. So like, I don't know if they're gonna ever be like something
Nah,
that
dude,
we want to have down the road.
I don't want to name names, man, because like I got a lot of friends in the industry, and I think it's net positive in a lot of ways. But I think Kanye, when he started printing $100 shirts on Gildan t-shirts and kept the tag in, it made everyone be like, all right, we're allowed to do this now. We could buy a $2 blank and sell it for 70.
Yeah, exactly.
That got quick. That and like as long as it's like a heavyweight tee with a big rib collar, neck, and it's like we're good. Don't worry about it. Just put it out, and it
Right.
worked. And now you see like real brand, not merch. You see brands doing it now,
Brands
and it's
doing it.
very, very surprising.
Yes. I wonder about all this Balenciaga stuff because it seems
Yeah.
so like of the moment and it seems like there's a lot of people that like especially even like since the term like clothes became pieces like ever since that kind of term
That's
happened.
a that's it. That's the rebrand I'm talking about. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, ever since that happened and you start seeing clothes like I wonder like if some of these like you know grotesquely priced items that are big social currency, like the big Balenciaga leather jacket, or maybe some of these, maybe some of like the jeans that they have, even
Yeah.
some of like Rick Owens stuff. Like I could see like a lot of it becoming big time collectible, but I wonder about specifically some of like the more like of the now trendier stuff that you see.
It's concern. I mean, what you described is the concern that I have about the future. And again, I don't want to age myself too much, but we're on the same block, literally like right. I'm actually connected. The wall behind me connects to the Rick Owens store, and then across the street's Margiela, and then like a block down, I think is Balenciaga. But the lines are there all day again now, and like
Yeah.
the queue is crazy. And inevitably, what happens is that people aren't going in there and buying the $20,000 leather pants. They're gonna leave, or like they're gonna leave with the t-shirt or something that's like 300, 400, 800, 1200, like that, and that becomes the approachable point. And these brands aren't dumb. They've been doing this for a long time. That's where they're going to make their margins. You know what I mean? Like, and there's no reason for them to change right now. You know what I mean? Like, until there's a reason to change, and that cycle always happens where we moved on from Zara and H&M and fast fashion. It went to pieces, and it became something where the social currency at a certain point was like the big bulky Balenciaga sneakers and wearing those on the street. And someone would spend their last $1,400 on those to walk around in neon yellow giant boots all day. And then it started to get beat up a little bit, and like then Mischief puts the red boots out, and those come and go quick. And like a lot's happened in the last year and a half on that. But those like $1,000 t-shirts kind of stuck around. And like the lower, what we consider the lower price point Rick Owens stuff that, ASAP Rocky talks about all day are the ultra relevant pieces that those kids are willing to spend big money on. There's no reason for those fashion houses to change where it goes and change like the collectability of it at this
Yeah.
point, you know?
I had a guest on. He was awesome. He's a Versace collector, and his
That's sick.
focus was just the stuff of when Gianni was still alive.
That's
He
sick.
doesn't even bother with the stuff that's
That's
produced.
the thing these kids don't do now. Like that's such a crazy thing
It's
to have.
crazy.
Like just
He's got
that,
the
you
silk
know?
shirts. They're so fly. They're so
That's
nice.
sick.
Yes. So I wonder about stuff like that. Like what now is, I mean, you have like the streetwear crowd and what they covet, but like there's no you can't get in because the prices are so sky high. But like what's some of the more kind of esoteric designer stuff that might be coming out right now that is maybe more attainable or at least you don't have to buy it on resale,
I
you know?
honestly, I really don't even know anymore. But I know that like in this neighborhood right now, what comes and goes is so hard to pinpoint. There are small brands like Dolls Kill, and I'm trying to think of others that are on the block where I didn't know about them until they popped up, and then you see a line of kids a mile long, and they're all kind of dressed the same, they all act the same, they all look the same, and it's like they know about it, but you don't. I think there's more of those are popping up now. The ability to sort of like go on TikTok and find out where like the Supreme blanks come from, like that type of thing, is way easy to find now, and in a week you'll have like a supplier in Peru and someone doing the tech packs overseas, and you'll have a designer off whatever, like doing this, this, and this. That's become way easier for new kids to come out and build something from scratch. I think that you're going to see less like rudes and more one-offs of kids who don't necessarily want to even make money with the product, and they're going to be selling 100 and 200 at a time. It's going to come and go quickly and never happen again.
Yeah.
It's like there's a few brands like that popping up now that it's really hard to pinpoint who's going to do it really well. There's a few in Australia. There's a couple of stateside, but it's really about like young designers who are not thinking about designing t-shirts. They're thinking about putting things that they design in people's hands. And it's this mix of
Ideas out.
objects,
Yeah.
items, pieces, all of it. Yeah.
It's,
They're getting
it's
their
very
ideas out. Exactly. And like, if they can get their ideas out and break even on it, that's the win. There's a lot of new brands coming out that think they're going to be doing that aren't, that'll be the next wave. I think it's going to be way, the individuality is coming back. I think it's going to be the next wave. It's going to be more about, we went from the Zaras to back to the Balenciagas where like spend all my money on it, going back into like, I'm done with all of this. I'll find this one thing on Instagram that only has 20 likes and that'll be my identity for the
I'll
next
wear
year.
Amazon basics.
Exactly. I do it myself. Like I do it nonstop. It's like, but I do that out of like utility because I'm an old man now. I think
Right.
old men just wear New Balances and buy Amazon basics, I assume.
Yeah. So wait, so okay, now please get me into watches.
Yeah.
I'm not a watch guy. If I had if when I'm gonna say that when, or if my plans go right, I'm gonna be a car guy. Okay, but get me
Same.
into watches. Like that's an area that like you hear Rolex, Patek Philippe, Cartier, but like I'm very surface level. Like, what are watches now? Like, what's the watch market like now? What are the cool ones? What are the ones
Yeah.
that you like? Like,
Just, I mean,
please.
you're still me. I buy everything I buy is vintage for the most part. In New York, if you want Rolexes anywhere, really want Rolex, you have to have a relationship with the AD,
I've
with
heard
the
about
direct.
this.
Yeah, and it's just like that. Thank God. I mean, I backed into that to relationships, so thank God they already exist. I don't have to go fight them. But also, like, I'm not in a position to be buying a new Rolex every week anyway. So like when I think about vintage, I think about like what I like at this point. The things that I wanted to buy, I kind of bought and held on to. I wear them a little bit, but like I'll tuck those away. And that's most for me, it's mostly Rolex. That's like to me is the Patek Philippe too, obviously, but that's a little less attainable for someone like me to get the best stuff. And I think it's still the rush to quality if you want to have it as an investment. It's gonna be the ones that the one of few that have a good story. A lot of the vintage sort of day dates, there's a lot of different reference numbers and doing the research, which is easy to Google and start finding now about the ones that were made during certain time periods to certain people. Ones that are stamped or have some sort of uniqueness to them that are outside of just the brand name on top of it are always important. But that's becoming more of a buy what you like, and if you make money on it, awesome. The same thing as art. So what we see in like New York as an example, so much of what we have here is driven by music culture more than anything else. So like when Tyler the Creator started wearing and showcasing a lot of like small, what were created for the ladies SKUs, Cartiers, that's when it popped off here. Crazy. And everyone wanted like a vintage Santos or like a vintage tank. Cartier Crashes went crazy, which is this Dolly inspired kind of watch that looks like it's all crashed up. That there's Paris stamp ones and London stamp ones. You got to do the research on those, but they're all $250,000 each now at this point. That was like the people who are driving those markets are buying what they like. A lot of it is vintage like 70s and 80s. And then it inevitably, like we talked about, the momentum comes from them putting it out in public that they own them now and that it's a thing and it becomes part of their identity. And that's still what drives so much of the market. So like if you're trying to catch the market for watches, it's almost impossible right now because it's moving like art, where the people that are in the know are the ones that dictate what's going to be hot next. The people on the outside are getting access to whatever they get access to. The entry level and like the one that's the most liquid still is like Rolex Submariners and Yacht Masters for the most part, stainless steel, and you could still kind of get those for like 11, 12 grand and have like a nice everyday watch that won't lose a ton of money, and you might be able to make money on it too. And that's been like the entry for a lot of people's first, like their watch journey has always been one of those two.
Yeah, that's something that I've never been able to penetrate. Like I've never been able to kind of dive into watches, partially because of the price, but even to be like an enthusiast, like even to be like on the sidelines looking through, watch whatever the watch magazines are or on the internet, like I've never kind of been able to, it's never really kind of clicked with me.
Not, I mean, it doesn't for everybody. It's a weird, like, you know, Apple's Apple's I think the second or maybe the first biggest watch company on earth, but no one
That
thinks
makes
about that
sense.
as like a collectible watch, and it kind of shouldn't.
Right.
But when Rolex does, 10 billion sales in a year, and the number two is Cartier, I believe, which is more than half that. Like they don't do even nearly as much as Rolex does. it's become more unavoidable now than ever before. It's in every conversation. It's one of those trappings of wealth again now, but it's not necessary. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you got to wear a t-shirt, you got to wear a shirt. You don't have to
Right.
wear a watch. So
Right.
like that type of stuff is more justified. I think it's more justifiable for a lot of people to spend like, 2000 on sneakers on a pair of sneakers than it is to spend like, four or $5,000 on a watch. And that's always kind of been the case. It's coming around now, but in Soho, that's not just a sign of like I made it in around here. Like it's a conversation piece as much as anything else, and and that's what drives so much collectability too, is of people wanting something they could tell a story behind too. And I think that the watches with the best stories in my mind, the vintage pieces, those are the ones that still win, and those are the ones that I focus on. It could be something that could be, my the watch that I love the most that I never really wear is a gold Omega constellation that was smuggled out of North Korea. It was part of Emperor Kim's collection for his 60th birthday, and it was
Wow.
only like it was $11,000 when I bought it, I think.
Wow.
Only because like nobody's gonna want that's like tainted goods. Nobody's gonna want that.
Right.
But to me, it's like it was cool to have because it's one of the very few gold versions of this watch. It's one of
Wow.
60 in the world. It's not something you're ever gonna find again. And it's part of a collection for me. It's part of a story that I could have. And there's good stories, there's bad stories, but they're all stories. And I think it's something I just wanted to have. And that's something that in the grand scheme of things, like the watch world would never get attention, but I just really, really wanted it when I saw it. And it's something that like I like a lot, but I'm not gonna like showcase that nonstop. It's just something I want to have.
Do you have people buying into watches as assets?
Always. I mean, that for us has always been like one of the biggest drivers of traffic. We have a bunch of them in our museum here. But it's like anything else. It's the ones that we have on Rally are the first of. So like a lot of the Rolexes we have are the first gold versions of a specific,
Wow.
day date or a specific Submariner that were part of the first 100 ever made that are serial marked and stamped and have all the paperwork that goes with them. Likewise, like the Audemars Piguets that we have one of the first ever made from Gerald Genta that was the original design that tells this story of the lineage for, 70 years of this specific watch. So all of it to us is like during COVID, during that run up in the pandemic, those prices went super crazy on watches and they became unobtainable. And I think a whole new group of collectors and enthusiasts was unlocked during that time. And we found places to put them basically. Like we're like, all right, we have the bet. You just got into Rolexes and you bought this, brand new day date. Here's the first one. And this is the one that's the most important. And here's why. And they inevitably wound up on Rally afterwards.
It's so true. There was this big boom of collectorism from COVID. It's really awesome.
It's crazy. They stuck around too. Like you realize some people weren't it just for money. Those people inevitably gravitate towards crypto and everything else now. But there's a lot of people that got into like watches as an example, and like I did when I was a kid, buying baseball cards, whatever. You make mistakes because you're not thinking about it as commerce. Think about it as the thing
Yeah.
I want.
Yeah.
Once you get the thing you want and you love it and you covet it, and it becomes part of your life and part of your conversation. You inevitably wind up trying to find other versions and doing the research. And I think that led a lot of people in their collecting journey to think about things less about price and binary outcome and more about the story and how it makes them feel. And those people stuck around from COVID, even though the prices came back down.
Are the watch people are looking for something specific right now that maybe was off your radar?
Uh, I think the way vintage Cartier took off, I probably could have seen coming in retrospect, but I didn't know it was going to be like this, where you know, 30, Rolex as an example, the 36 millimeter Rolex, which was like their first day date, the presidential date, the Rolex was 36 millimeter. Now they're 40 and 41, and even there's like even bigger faces for certain Rolexes that have like the same capabilities. They took over for a little while, but going back to these really small, like 26 millimeter faces on men and 24 millimeter faces that look really tiny but are designed, I think is becoming way more important. And there's a
Cool.
lot of independent watchmakers and smaller watchmakers like David Bethune and F.P. Journe that aren't on the radar of most recreational collectors, but they're doing things in small batches of 400 and 500,
Wow.
really, really unique watchmaking. And the story, when you read about it and see it and watch the video of them being made, there's so much craftsmanship that goes into it. I think that's what you're seeing a lot of people gravitate towards now once they've gotten their first couple Rolexes and Pateks and they kind of check the boxes. Now it's like, what's next? It's becoming these really small, esoteric watchmakers and smaller face vintage watches that weren't necessarily made for a man's wrist or even thought about as collectible in the past, but now are becoming way harder to find. So inevitably people want them more.
Wow. That's still it's you're talking to me and like it's still like
Another
wow,
language.
this is still so hard for me to get to
I don't know. It's
into.
all of it is. I'm talking about these like esoteric little things. Like it's just
But I love that. But it's still like I'm like wow, like that's so to think like when I think about like the legwork that I would have to put in just to get a shallow version of connoisseurmanship for watches, I'm just like my anxiety just like overrides that whole.
Yo, it's like any of these, all these collectible like I'm exposed to it every day because I have to be for so many of the stuff, so many things that we do at Rally. But it's kind of like social media where it's like you got to pick your thing. You got to pick one. You can't
Yes.
have like you can't be all over Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and this and that. It's like pick one and make that your thing. You kind of have to do the same thing with like collecting anything, or or it becomes noise. Like they're no longer signals. There's too much information. There's so
Yes.
much available now. You know?
I've spent my life kind of obsessing about so many other things that to think about, like I would have to start from scratch with watches. It's
Yeah,
kind of an
it's
exciting,
daunting.
it's very daunting, but it's kind of like an exciting kind of proclamation to make. I could think about it being very, very interesting, but at the same time, I'm also like, no, 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 don't even start. Maybe, when you do have enough money, get the good one that you want, but then stay away. But
Dude,
I don't think that's how it would work.
that's it though, man. The only thing better than like something you already have is something new. It's just it's
Right.
like getting it is the kick. You know what I mean? Not having it
Yes.
and getting go and being able to deep dive into something brand new for the first time, being that honeymoon phase with like this
Yes.
new thing that you knew nothing about and
Yeah.
make that part of your life is just like it's for anyone creative, it's the best feeling in the world. That's what you need to have. It keeps you alive, you know?